Okay, so we're only going to get through the first part of this today, and then we'll finish the rest of it on Monday next week. And this is going to kind of be applicable to any time you have to do a Pave layout on something that you either don't have step-by-step directions for, or you don't have a really simple surface. So you can try this when we get to the end of it. You can try this method on other shapes of surfaces if you want to make something that's not necessarily symmetrical. This is like a radial symmetry, but you can do it on something that's not necessarily symmetrical. And to do this, I'm going to start by just deleting all of my gems except for the round one. And I'll just start by recording this and get this up for you guys if you want to look at it through the week. If you have time, that's great. And if not, we'll just start with it next week. And the dimension of this currently is, if I snapped my end snaps for this gem, I think we said it was 6.6 millimeters. So in the last demo, we scaled the gem using a scale factor. So I think it was a scale factor of 2 or 0.5, and that doubles or halves the size. But if you have to scale to a really specific size, you want to have more control than just a factor reference. So the way I like to scale a gem, and for this, we're going to scale it to 1.5 millimeters, is I like to, so I'm trying to use the buttons here, I like to draw a line and snap it to the end snap on that girdle. We're going to be snapping a lot of things to the end snaps of those girdles, so get used to that anyway. And then just constrain it to 1.5, and I have ortho on. And now I have, even though you can't see it, I have a little 1.5 millimeter line underneath my gem. So I'm going to scale my gem, transform, scale 3D, starting at the same point I drew the line from. I'm just going to start by making my gem really small so I can see the line as well. And then I'm just going to repeat the scale. So I hit enter to repeat the scale. And I'm going to start where I drew that line from at that origin point. I'm going to snap to the far end across the other side of the diameter of my gem is my first reference. And by constraining it to my end snap, my second reference is going to make my gem match whatever the line length was. So that's 1.5 millimeters. If you have a gem that's 2.420 or 2.498, and that's how sensitive your calipers are, you can use that method to make that gem exactly that size. And there are some methods for scaling other shapes that you guys have probably already talked about, but I can repost those as well. And then I'm going to take my gem, I get rid of the line, I don't really need that anymore, and I'm going to use the move command, and my reference point for moving will be from the culet to 0, and that puts it right back in the center of my workspace. So it's the easiest way to scale and center your initial gem that you're using. And then the first thing that I'm going to do is, because I haven't given you guys a cutter with the gem, you guys are going to have to make cutters. So it's really easy. All you want to do is draw another line, snapped to your girdle, straight up. And in this case, I'm going to make the line, I'm going to call this the crown wall of my cutter. And I'm going to make it 1 to 1.2 millimeters tall. And I'm being really specific. In most cases, if I'm doing a layout, I don't care what the height of my cutter is. But in this case, I'm going to use it later as a reference, and I need it to be that height. So I'm going to make mine 1 millimeter, let's make it 1.2 millimeters tall. Let's make it 1.1 millimeters. I'll just split the difference and go right down the middle. So this is 1.1 millimeter, and when I go to create a claw or a pin, and I know I want it to be 1 millimeter tall, I can use the top of my cutter as the reference for my pin. So I've already put that geometry kind of in place for myself. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create an angled seat for the pavilion. And I'm just going to, I want to snap to the end of my line to do that. So I'm just going to create a line. I have my end snap on. You could also do this with polyline, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to turn ortho off. And it just has to be roughly the angle of the pavilion. These are not perfect gem models, and your real life gems will not be perfect, and you'll be re-drilling it with a setting burr to clean it up. So let's just not be too specific about it. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create another line that goes about halfway with ortho, and I can move this afterwards. And that just creates a nice seat cutter profile. So I can just hide this for a moment, and I can trim, get rid of this, get rid of this. And now these are all separate pieces still, so I'm going to join these. And then I'm going to revolve. Surface tools, revolve. My axis will be up the Z axis in this case, and a full 360 degrees. And now all I want to do to finish this up is to, where's my set view tab? Set view. I just want to cap this. Solid tools and cap planar holes is here somewhere. In here somewhere. Cap planar holes. There it is. Okay. Or type cap, whatever you prefer. And that gives me this cutter. I'm going to fillet the bottom of my cutter because I want to think of this as, I personally, in a lot of things, I don't like the guide holes to go all the way through the piece. I think it can look really messy at the back. It depends if it's inside a dome of a pave ring, obviously, sure, put it all the way through. If it's a pendant, I might want a smooth back, or I might want a different detail on the back, so I don't want my cutters to go all the way through. So to finish this off, as though I was actually just gonna consider this the finished cutout, I'm just gonna fillet the bottom of this. So solid tools, fillet edge, and try to make it almost half round, not quite. So I'm gonna try 0.4. That's too much. Let's try again. 0.25. Yeah, okay, so that works for me. That's a nice cutter for that gem. And then you can delete this or hide it or whatever you want to do. And show your diamond. I'm going to give this its own layer, cutters. And I'm going to make it orange because that's my traditional cut color. I have a system for my color coding, so I know what's for what. You can color code things however you want. I like orange for cutting tools. No reason. There it is. I'm going to group these together. And that creates sort of the first piece of geometry that I'll need. And if you're given a file and you have a gem and they don't give you the cutter with it, it's quite easy to make. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sphere. And I can hide this after, but for now I'm just going to keep this where I can see it. And I'm just going to create a sphere. Solid tools. From the center. And I'm going to make my sphere about, what did I do for this? 2.5 millimeters, I think. Yeah, 2.5 centimeters, 25 millimeters. And I just want to make sure when I'm doing this in my top view, because you see how it looks like I have spokes going through, my iso curves on this sphere all converge in the center, which is ideally what I want for this, just because I know how I want to lay this out. So I'm going to make my diameter 25 millimeters. And again, the idea is that you start to lay things out without set instructions. So if you want to make it larger or smaller, go for it. Make it, the larger you make it, the more layout you have to do, but you want to be able to make things the size you want, and you can do more or less wave undulations in this if you like. And I'm going to scale this in 1 dimension to flatten it. And then I can either move my cutter and my gem up, or I can move this down. It doesn't really matter. Excuse me, and I'm going to rebuild it. And that's our little hammer friend there. And I want 12 was what I did for this, but again, you can do 8, or I would keep it an even number. It's going to make your life easier, but if you want to be a rebel and make an odd number, that's also your prerogative. So now I've rebuilt this and I have a slightly more complex sphere here. And now what I'm going to do is first I want to trim this in half because I don't want this to be domed on the bottom, or I certainly don't want the wave to be on the bottom. So I'm going to trim this in half, and to do that I just create a cut plane starting at 0. And you can make this as an open or closed surface, it doesn't matter at this point. So I'll just split that, and I'll delete my cut plane, and I'll delete the bottom half. So for now an open surface would be fine. And we'll just we'll hide these guys for a minute so they're not in the way. And we'll turn the points on. And now all I'm going to do is I'm going to select the points in every other spoke, but I'm going to leave the center unselected. If I do the center points, because they converge so tightly here, it's going to have a really sharply rippled effect. That center is going to just get cut out and have those settings in there anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's going to be easier and a more simple surface if I just get rid of them at the end. So for now, I'm just going to select everything I need, and then I'll get rid of the center set of spokes. And when you're moving these points, you can, you can use a different amount of movement from what I've used. It doesn't have to match mine. I just gave suggestions. So I'm just getting rid of these central spokes, and everything else going outward is selected. It's just a single surface on the top, so I don't care if I select the points all the way through down to the bottom. And I'm just going to move, and I have ortho on, and I'm just going to move them up or down. Really doesn't matter. It's the same difference whether you go up or down. And I'm going to move these guys up, and I think I said the first one was going to be like 0.5 millimeter. Let's try that. This might be a little bit different from my original sample. So we'll go 0.5 millimeter up, and then I'm going to deselect using Control and get rid of this middle circle again. And I'm going to move up, and maybe this time I'll do 0.75 so that my motion is getting exponentially larger each step. And then I'm just going to deselect. And you could also create this kind of a thing. Oops, don't move. I didn't want to do that. You could also create this kind of thing using like a rail revolve to create a wavy surface. I wanted a nice simple surface, which is why I think this works well, but there's lots of ways to create a wavy surface, thinking about where your ISO curves will be so that you can do your pave layout afterwards. So I'm going to move this again using the move button. And this time I'll do 1 millimeter, and then I'll deselect. And maybe this will be, oh, come on. Maybe this will be 1.5 millimeter or whatever it's going to be. And I'll just move it one more time, and we'll do 1.5. Okay, and so that's going to give me a nice wavy surface. You could make it more extreme, but the idea is that we want to lay out some pave on this, because a dome, if you can do this, you'll have no trouble with a dome whatsoever. So now I would copy this to a layer, a parts layer. So let's just copy to parts layer. And I have that there in case I really make a gigantic mistake and want to fix it from there. And then if I just show, and then we'll start doing the layout, but what I want to do is I just want to sync this so that the table height is in line with the center, and this is going to be where I start my pave layout for this from. I'm just going to pause it right there.